over time, that premium declines, so that interest rates converge on the leaders over time. When a new entrant comes on the market, they have to pay the premium, then they converge over time. That's a standard laws of motion that takes place in world financial capital markets, either in the first global century in the late 19th century or the late 20th century. Well, that's great because that'll help, because it means that poor countries like the Philippines start in the 1870s. They can't, financial capital is too expensive. They're not well integrated in the global financial capital markets. They have to pay a very high price for financial capital, so they have to go it alone. But over time, that premium declines. And the edge in terms of cheap financial capital that Britain, the US, and Germany has erodes. Today, of course, it's gone completely, whatever advantage was there. And same thing is true of this period. So that would help explain the catching up if capital got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper relative to the advanced economies from the financial part of the tale. So we should explore that as a possibility. And also, it may also be true to the price of capital goods. If the intelligent authorities in the periphery, when they do have autonomy, develop a tariff policy which sets very high tariffs on final manufacturers that are entering the economy, but very low tariffs on intermediates, fuels, and capital goods. That would be an intelligent policy to protect industry. And if you do that, then the price of capital goods relative to the price of the stuff it's producing would drop too. So both those components you would predict would decline over that century relative to the leaders. It must help account for catching up, and how big those changes are will dictate who gets the biggest advantage first. Unfortunately, I don't have the data. So that's coming, but there's the theoretical prediction anyway that you'd expect out of this. Getting to the end of the story, but what about fuel and intermediate costs? This will also be disappointing. I'm awaiting the data. But we know what the stories are, and we'll see how they turn out. So here they are. Big debate about the importance of energy and mineral deposits, and whether that gives you an industrial revolutionary advantage. We observe Britain had it. We observe Germany had it, or had it close by, and we observe the US had it. Had the availability of very cheap coal and ores, giving them that industrial base for industrialization. Okay, if you're the Philippines, you're dead in the water, right? I mean, you don't have very good fuel sources, and you don't have very good mineral sources. So how are you going to get an industrial revolution going if that's true? Well, one way you do it is you allow globalization to erase the advantages in the leading countries and give it to you. That is, as the cost of moving coal around the globe and the cost of moving petroleum around the globe declines, so that if I decide, gee, I'd like to industrialize, and if I need, and I need the energy, so I need to buy those fuel inputs, I can get them on world markets. No big deal. Transportation costs aren't big. No tariffs, to worry about. And so I'm not going to have to pay much more than some guy in Pittsburgh has to pay for his coal. So that's the argument, that over the century, we know there's an immense convergence around the globe in the price of energy and the price of intermediates. But we don't know how big those changes are, and specifically the countries, to be able to see how much of the industrial catching up is being caught by that. But in terms of modern debates over control of natural resources and fuels, the answers might speak well to those issues. We know these shares, that is how important are intermediates, that sigma M and the sigma F, how big are those cost shares? I mean, the manufacturing producers care about them. Well, intermediates in textiles, cotton textiles, what, raw cotton's what, 80% of gross costs? Huge. So any deviance in the price of raw cotton will matter a lot in terms of your competitiveness. And if you don't grow cotton, then you got to import the stuff. And if it comes a long distance, you may have big transportation costs attached to it, and you're at a disadvantage in competing with world markets as a result. Well, unfortunately, and there are some countries that really screw up, like Mexico. They do grow cotton, well, poor cotton. They grow cotton in Mexico. And of course, the landlords who control the cotton acreage were pushing very hard for protection against very productive American cotton producers, which is great for the cotton growers, not great for the textile producers. And that tension, goes on for a long time in Mexico. It's kind of critical to their industrialization debates. Okay, here's the interesting bit, and then I'll let you go. My expectation is that early in this long century we're looking at, 1870 and 1975, the price of energy varied a lot across the world. Here it is how it varies in Europe alone. Russia had to pay 4 or 5 times the price that firms in Lancashire had to pay for fuels. Immense disadvantage. It had to overcome it with other things. But an immense disadvantage in terms of the cost of fuels in Russia. And it's bigger elsewhere. There's the ranges around the world, and look what it was in Manila. That's the coal price. Is that what that is? Yeah, the coal price in Manila is 73% higher than the coal price in the key competitor in Britain, in Lancashire. So they start the game off with an immense disadvantage in terms of the cost of fuels. Now, did that disadvantage erode over time as globalization took place? And so that pretty much anybody could get the coal they wanted for roughly the same price to erode the advantage of the leaders and give it back to the followers? Don't know, don't have the data yet, but that's my expectation. So the agenda is clear. We know we can document where and when industrialization spread across what we now call the third world, or the poor periphery, over that century, and includes the ISI period. So the ISI period is really what attracts me, but I have to do this other stuff first to see what's unusual about it compared to the earlier periods. We know that the spread deepened and widened over time. More and more countries got involved. Those countries that were involved improved their catching up performance. And we know we have a way in which we can decompose the sources of it. What's missing is a lot of the necessary data, which it's there, but I have to work on getting. So you'll see what the result is later on.